Rabbi Raphael Shore, hello, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
So, Rabbi Shore, you have extensively explored anti-Semitism both in your book, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew, and now in your new documentary, Tragic Awakening, where you examine the words understated. So, let's start with perhaps the biggest question of all. Has one of history's greatest enigmas finally been solved? Why is there such deep-seated hatred towards Jews?
Well, it's a very good question. Obviously, as you say, this is one of the biggest enigmas. And what I do in this book, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew, is I'm challenging the status quo. I'm challenging conventional wisdom. I think that we, the Jewish community, have settled for a very unsatisfactory explanation of why the Jews have been hated for so long. We all know the fact, how long we've been hated, but why we tend to explain by saying, yeah, they needed to blame somebody for their problems. The Jews were at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a regular bias. People don't like others, or we're too assimilated, or we're not assimilated enough, or we're too rich, or we're too poor. And we tend to accept these superficial explanations. What I've done in the book is explored the view of the anti-Semites. In particular, the greatest anti-Semite in history, Adolf Hitler, explains very clearly why he doesn't like the Jews and why he wanted to wipe us out. So it's a fascinating approach, which is hard to say in 30 seconds, but I will if you want me to explain what he says.
Right.
And I will try. And what's fascinating about it is that Hitler's explanation actually matches the Torah's explanation for why Jews have been hated. So what Hitler said very explicitly, and I'm not saying once or twice, this was his ideology that he repeated over and over again from 1920 till 1945, his whole career, was that the Jewish people were instrumental in changing humanity and bringing values and ideas into the world that he hated, that he thought were going to destroy humanity. What were those ideas? The ideas of love your neighbor, brotherhood of all mankind, God, ethical monotheism, human rights. And Adolf Hitler believed if those ideas were successful, and they were being successful at taking over all of Western civilization, that would be the destruction of humanity. Because humanity grows like the animals, natural selection, might makes right, power, dominance. So Hitler was trying to reset the world, and he needed to destroy every Jew because he believed that every Jew had this spiritual DNA, whether they're religious or not. Hitler said every Jew had the spiritual DNA of bringing these humanitarian ideas into the world. I believe at the very core of anti-Semitism is a fight against these values that the Jewish people were entrusted to bring into the world.
Basically, you suggest that the roots of anti-Semitism go back to Mount Sinai.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Hitler said it, but the Gemara, the Talmud also says at Mount Sinai, hatred came down into the world. Exactly like you just said. At Sinai, Sin'ah came into the world. So you know the play on words, Sinai, Sin'ah. So the two are very related. When the Jewish people were tasked with a mission of bringing these ideas into the world, that created resistance. People have a body and a soul. The body doesn't like to be told to be good and moral and spiritual and have the responsibility of freedom. So there's a push and pull throughout human history, and just like a human life has a push and pull, and that resistance is called anti-Semitism.
One of the most intriguing aspects of your new documentary is the participation of Ran Osman. What can you tell us about this collaboration?
Yes, Ran is an Arab Zionist. She is an amazing person. She came to me. I run an organization called Open Door Media, or Unpacked, and she came to me after October 7th as an Arab who is a recovered anti-Semite. That's what she called herself. And she's realized over the course of the last 10 years, a journey that the Jewish people in Israel are actually very good. and the hatred is something irrational, strange. So after October 7th, she wanted to speak out in Arabic to the Arabic speaking world about Israel and the Jewish people and try to set them straight. And so she came to me for help, and we said, wow, this is an amazing person. This is a remarkable human being. So I've been working with her closely for the last year, and we chose her to be the featured person on our film because she was exploring what is the nature of anti-Semitism. And it turns out that the answer to why there's anti-Semitism is the flip side of what is the mission of the Jewish people. And this is what she really reflects. So Ran Osman, a former anti-Semite who's living in Germany, is now an Arab Zionist who wants to become Jewish and make Aliyah and live in Israel. She's a remarkable person.
Let's put all these insights into context. Following the October 7th massacre, the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, Israel is still perceived by many as the aggressor. What is your conclusion? How do you explain this shift in the narrative?
Well, it's exact same points. Yes, it's another example. They don't hate us because we're committing genocide. They don't hate us because we have a little property, Judea, Samaria, or Gaza. It's the latest excuse. It's the same thing when we were too rich and too poor or too communist or too capitalist. Today, we're the colonialists. There's something bothering them, bothering anti-Semites, including much of the Islamist world today, about the Jewish people. And it's deep down. And it's even progressive liberals today. It's bothering them about the Jews, and they label it anything. But the double standard proves it. In other words, it's obvious we're not the worst genocidal, human rights violating people on the planet. We're the most moral army that the world has ever seen in the most difficult, complex set of circumstances against the greatest human rights violators of Hamas that the world has ever seen in a conflict. Any person who's a balanced thinker, who's not biased and not anti-Semitic in their core, is going to see that. But if someone really doesn't like the Jews, so here's another opportunity to say you're genocidal, you're baby killers. It's just anti-Semitism has morphed once again successfully, this time in the disguise of human rights and what's wrong with Israel. Let's not be fooled. The reason I wrote the book and the film is to help us not be fooled and to give the Jewish people strength, to have the inner army to face this negativity, to face the anti-Semitism, and not only have defense against it, but to come out proud because they hate us because of our greatness, because of our goodness. So we need to flip it on its head. You agree? Yeah.
While making the film, was there anything that particularly shocked you?
Ran Osman surprised me because she is just such an incredibly inspiring person. And she is a role model for how we all need to respond. And actually in the book, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew, at the end of the book, I tell about 15 stories of amazing people. Sapir Cohen is another one. People who faced anti-Semitism, looked at it head on, and instead of responding by being less Jewish or less connected, responded morally and spiritually with strength. That's the best response because anti-Semitism is a moral and spiritual phenomena. Our response should be that way. Ran Osman and these others, like people like Sapir, blow my mind. They're just so incredibly inspiring.
I must ask, if this all rooted in old anti-Semitism, and that's why we hear accusations of genocide and calls to free Palestine, is there even chance to win this battle over public perception?
That's a great question. And my answer to that is that anti-Semitism has been going on for 3,000 years. And while I am optimistic, and I believe that in the end of the story, we will have peace on earth and we will have peace with our neighbors. But in the short term, I think our most important priority is to strengthen ourselves against this onslaught. Because especially if you're a young person, an American Jew on college campus today, your challenge is to stay Jewish, because they're telling you, we don't want you to be Jewish. We don't want you supporting Israel. And if you want to be part of our crowd, check your Judaism at the door. Check your pro-Israelism at the door. So the greatest challenge today for the Jewish people is not to stop anti-Semitism, but to stay Jewish in the face of anti-Semitism. And to do that, we need to understand it and flip it on its head and be inspired by what it means. Fighting anti-Semitism is good. Fighting the anti-Semites, straightening them out, but I don't think that's the most important battle.
In your view, who is the most dangerous, maybe, figure promoting anti-Semitism today?
Well, you've got, that's a great question. First of all, if you don't mind, it's against conventional wisdom also, although it's more understood now. But the Palestinian community is, according to the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, the most anti-Semitic population on earth. And unfortunately, we Jews did not face that reality. And we think, oh, they just have a problem because we have some land that they want. And we were fooled. Yeah, there's some land dispute, but they have been brainwashed to be anti-Semitic haters, and we need to face it. And it's not just Hamas, it's the entire community. One of the hostages who just came out, I heard, she said, there's not 2 million citizens in Gaza, there's 2 million terrorists. And I'm sure some of them are nice over there, but there's been a level of indoctrination and brainwash that it is a very hateful society. So that's number one. Number two, I think the progressive community, the elite progressive community in America is very dangerous, and the university campuses are very dangerous. And we also have to worry about the far right. People like Tucker Carlson are definitely something that we should be flagging and concerned about. But mostly, let's strengthen ourselves.
What about Kanye West, for example?
Yeah, terrible influence. And what's her name? Courtney or whatever. I mean, and these people have tens of hundreds of millions of followers, and one comment, but that's why I say fighting anti-Semitism is not the key, because you can put tens of millions of dollars in, and you're not going to reach the same audience that Kanye West just did with one little tweet. And so it's good to fight it, but most importantly, let's respond and be strong Jews. They hate us for being Jewish. Let's be Jewish. And I think that since it's a moral and spiritual phenomena, if we strengthen ourselves, if we're united as a Jewish people and stand for what our values are, I think that's the most powerful response and even solution to anti-Semitism in the long run.
That's an important point. On a personal note, if I may, Rabbi Shore, you come from a well-known family. Your father, Rabbi Marvin Shore, was a Canadian politician. Your twin brother, Ephraim, led the Honest Reporting Initiative. And your older brother, David, is a screenwriter best known for creating House. Growing up, was anti-Semitism ever a personal issue in your family?
It was in general, no. My father was not a rabbi. Yeah, I got it almost right. My father was a politician. He grew up as the only Jew in a small town in Canada, and he never faced anti-Semitism his whole life. Then we grew up in a small town, London, Ontario, 20 Jews out of 1,000 in my high school, and we were part of the mainstream cool kids. At one point when I was in grade 12, all of a sudden anti-Semitism came out of nowhere. And the Friday night party, I described this story in my book. At the Friday night party, a sign was put out, "No Jews allowed." And this is after we're hanging out with these people for years. And no Jews allowed. All of a sudden, it turns out that there's a lot of anti-Semitism even amongst our friends. So overall, it wasn't a problem growing up, but then they showed their colors. And that was definitely a seminal moment. My brother and I, my twin brother and I, we shifted schools, but I became more Jewish and I moved to Israel, made Aliyah right after college, not because of anti-Semitism, but because I realized how incredible we are, the Jewish people, and being home in our homeland and being part of a beautiful family of the Jewish people and our traditions. And I understood how amazing Israel and Judaism are. That's what brought me to live in Israel and be more connected.
Rabbi Raphael Shore, thank you so much for your insights and for this conversation. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.